My name's Tom, and I had just turned 55 when this all happened. If you told me a year ago that my family would be the ones to teach me the hardest, coldest lesson of my life, I wouldn't have believed you. I wasn't a perfect husband or father, but I thought I had done right by them. Paid the bills, made it to every school event, every doctor's appointment, every anniversary. Built a life they could feel safe in. I thought that was enough. Turns out, sometimes people get so comfortable standing on the foundation you built that they start to resent you for reminding them it didn't build itself. It all started about a month before my birthday. My wife, Carla, started dropping these hints. "This year's gonna be different," she said one night while we sat on the couch, her scrolling her phone, me half listening while pretending to read the news. I raised an eyebrow, asking what she meant. She just gave me this mischievous little wink and said, "Trust us." I figured maybe they were planning a big dinner, or maybe the kids had pooled together to get me something nice, a watch, maybe, or tickets to a ball game. I smiled. It felt good, after years of low-key birthdays where I insisted I didn't want much, to have them making an effort. Over the next few weeks, it kept happening. Carla whispering to my daughter Lindsay, who was home from college. My son, Jake, tossing a knowing look at me when I asked if I should request my birthday off work. "You'll want the day free," he grinned. "Just get ready." I didn't push it. I thought maybe, just maybe, I was finally going to have one of those birthdays you see in the movies, the kind that makes all the small sacrifices worth it. The day finally arrived. I woke up to an empty bed, which wasn't weird. Carla was an early riser. I took my time showering, shaving carefully, putting on a nice button-up instead of my usual t-shirt. I didn't want to seem too eager, but inside, I was buzzing like a kid on Christmas morning. I kept expecting someone to burst through the door with a surprise at any moment. But no one did. Downstairs, the house was silent. No balloons. No smells of breakfast cooking. No coffee brewing. Just the hum of the fridge and the ticking of the clock on the wall. I walked around, half smiling, waiting for the joke. Maybe they were all hiding. Maybe they were waiting at a restaurant, and this was part of the gag. An hour passed. Then two. I checked my phone. No messages. No calls. I sat on the couch for a while, feeling my heart sink deeper with each minute that ticked by. By noon, the hope had twisted itself into something colder, something harder. I tried to convince myself there was still a plan. Maybe they were just running late. At 3, I finally caved and called Carla. Straight to voicemail. I called Lindsay. Straight to voicemail. Jake. Same thing. Now the cold feeling wasn't just in my chest. It had sunk into my stomach, heavy and sick. It wasn't until almost 5 o'clock that I opened Facebook. I wasn't even thinking, just scrolling out of habit, trying to numb myself. That's when I saw it. A big photo posted by Lindsay. My whole family. Carla, Jake, Lindsay, even Carla's sister and her kids. All grinning in front of a cozy-looking mountain cabin. The caption? "Finally some peace without him." I stared at the screen, my hand frozen. I didn't even feel anger at first. Just a kind of hollow confusion, like the ground had dropped out beneath me. I clicked through the photos in a daze. There they were, roasting marshmallows by a fire, playing board games, hiking. Lindsay even posted a picture of the front porch with the caption, "No grumps allowed." I sat there for a long time, just breathing. No tears, no rage. Just this slow, burning realization that I had been a convenience to them for years. The guy who paid for things, who stayed quiet when he was left out, who showed up when no one else did. They didn't even bother pretending anymore. I didn't comment. I didn't call. I didn't even text. Instead, I sat very still and let the weight of it settle into me fully. Then I stood up, walked upstairs, and pulled out the old manila folder where I kept all the banking passwords, lease documents, and account info. See, what they seemed to forget was that this house, the one they lived in and laughed in and planned vacations from, was leased in my name. Our bank accounts, where the bulk of the money sat, were joint, but the majority of deposits over the years had been mine. They took for granted that I would just keep everything running while they spit in my face. I spent the rest of the evening calmly, methodically moving money. I transferred everything from our joint checking to my personal savings, an account I had set up years ago when Carla's spending started getting a little reckless. Back then, I told myself it was just a safety net. Tonight, it became the lifeboat. The lease was up for renewal in a month, and I had already been considering moving closer to work. Now, it wasn't a consideration. I logged into the leasing portal and submitted a notice to vacate. 30 days. No extension. By the next morning, the house was still silent. I packed a small bag with essentials, some clothes, important documents, the old photo albums they never bothered looking at anymore, and checked into a hotel across town. I didn't leave a note. I didn't answer the few stray texts that trickled in. "You okay?" from Jake. "Where you at?" from Lindsay. I figured the panic would set in eventually. It was just a matter of time. 3 days passed before the Real flood began. The messages started out as jokes about Dad finally getting some alone time. But slowly, the tone changed. The first real crack came from Jake. "Hey Dad, can you send some money? We forgot the cabin rental's due today, and Mom's card isn't working." Then from Carla. "Tom, call me. We need to talk. Please." Lindsay chimed in later. "Dad? Where are you? Mom's freaking out. The house. There's a notice on the door." I watched it all come through, sitting in my hotel room with a cup of coffee, feeling not joy, not satisfaction, just a kind of grim clarity. A confirmation that I had been right to walk away, that this wasn't a family that had lost its way. This was a family that had never truly seen me at all. I didn't answer. I didn't call. I just waited, letting the silence stretch and watching as their messages shifted from smug to panicked, from taunting to desperate. And then, right when it all began to truly unravel, something happened that made everything spiral even faster. It started with a phone call from our landlord. Well, my landlord at that point. Mr. Delaney was an older guy, always fair but very no-nonsense. I saw his name flash on my screen as I sipped my coffee, debating whether to answer. Curiosity got the better of me. "Tom," he said the moment I picked up, voice tight with frustration, "I just had your wife and some girls screaming at me in the office about an eviction notice. I told them you gave proper notice to vacate. They're demanding I reverse it." I could almost hear him rolling his eyes. "I assume this isn't a misunderstanding?" "No misunderstanding," I said calmly. "I'm not renewing the lease. I gave the 30 days notice." He grunted approvingly. "Figured as much. Just wanted to confirm. I'll keep all communication directed to you." "Thanks, Mr. Delaney," I said, hanging up with a strange, steady kind of finality. It wasn't just text messages now, it was real. Their little vacation bubble was popping fast. Within the hour, the calls started. Carla, Lindsay, Jake, over and over. I didn't pick up. They left voicemails that grew increasingly frantic. "Tom, call me back. We didn't know about the lease." "Dad, what's going on? Mom's freaking out. They're saying we have to move." "Tom, answer your damn phone. You're acting like a child." Funny, wasn't it? When they abandoned me, it was peace without him. But when they realized the house and the money weren't waiting for them when they got back, suddenly I was the child for not holding their hands through it. Later that evening, after a leisurely dinner at a local steakhouse, something I hadn't treated myself to in years, I logged into Facebook again. Carla had posted a passive-aggressive status. Some people show their true colors when you least expect it. Family means sticking together, not abandonment. #disappointed. #moving forward. I chuckled under my breath. Moving forward, right into a rental office, maybe, if they could scrape together first and last month's rent without the account they used to spend so freely from. The next morning, I decided to swing by the house, not out of nostalgia, but because I still had a few personal things there, mainly tools and keepsakes tucked away in the garage. I figured early morning would be safest. When I pulled up, my heart twisted. Not because I missed it, but because it didn't feel like mine anymore. It was just a building. A stage where I'd played the role of husband, father, provider, while they whispered behind the curtains about how much better the play would be without me. I parked down the block and walked up the driveway. That's when I saw them, Carla sitting on the front step, her face red and puffy, Lindsay pacing back and forth with her phone glued to her ear, and Jake standing near the mailbox, scowling like a sulky teenager despite being 23 years old. They spotted me immediately. Carla jumped up, rushing toward me. "Tom, finally. Thank God. Listen, we can fix this. Just come inside, we'll talk." I held up a hand, cutting her off. "I'm just here to get my things." Lindsay stomped over, lowering her phone. "Dad, seriously? Why are you doing this?" Jake sneered. "You're acting like a psycho. Mom said you're trying to make us homeless." I stared at them, feeling that old sadness bubbling up, but this time, it didn't drown me. It just floated there, like an ugly little balloon I refused to carry anymore. "I gave 30 days notice," I said evenly. "Plenty of time to find somewhere new. You might want to use the money you didn't spend on my birthday party to get started. Carla flushed, her mouth opening and closing like she didn't know what to say. Dad, come on, Lindsay said, her voice softer now. We didn't mean anything by the Facebook post. It was just a joke. A joke. I repeated quietly. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo she posted, them all smiling in front of the cabin, captioned, "Finally some peace without him." Some joke. Jake crossed his arms. You're being dramatic. I laughed, really laughed, the sound strange and sharp in the cool morning air. You don't get to tell me how to feel after what you did. Carla stepped forward again, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Please, Tom. We can't afford to move right now. Lindsay's tuition is due. Jake's car payment. And whose fault is that? I asked. Who decided it was smart to cut off the person paying for all of it because they thought it would be fun to humiliate him? Their faces shifted then, a collective realization dawning that maybe, just maybe, they had pushed too far. That maybe the man they thought would always be there, quietly holding everything up, had finally let go. I'll be out of your way in 10 minutes, I said, walking past them into the garage. They didn't try to stop me. I could feel their eyes on my back as I packed my things, slow, deliberate movements, giving them all the time in the world to sit with what they'd done. When I finally loaded the last box into my car, Carla rushed over one more time. Tom, please, just come inside. Let's talk. We can work something out. I looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman who had once held my hand during Lindsay's birth, who had once danced barefoot with me in the kitchen, who had once whispered promises of forever when we were too young to know what forever meant. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided I was disposable, I said quietly. And without another word, I got in my car, pulled out of the driveway, and drove away, leaving them standing there, smaller than I had ever seen them. But I wasn't free yet. Because as the days passed, the consequences of what I'd done began to ripple out, and what they did next made everything even uglier. At first, it was almost peaceful. I settled into a small apartment on the other side of town, nothing fancy, just a clean, quiet place where nobody slammed doors or rolled their eyes at me for asking how their day went. I focused on my work, caught up with a few old friends I hadn't seen in years, and even started jogging again. For the first time in a long time, I felt like a human being instead of a human wallet. But peace, as it turns out, doesn't last long when you're dealing with people who think the world owes them something. The first shot across the bow came in the form of a text from Lindsay. Hey, Dad. So, Mom says you're legally obligated to help support us since you left. You can't just walk away. We're family. I stared at the screen for a long moment before setting the phone down without replying. Legally obligated? They weren't minors. They weren't helpless. They were grown adults who thought that because I had always carried them, I always would. The next day, an email from Carla. Short, clipped, and absolutely seething with entitlement. Tom, you're making a mistake. We can sue for spousal abandonment. Also, the kids deserve financial support during this transition. Call me immediately so we can discuss reasonable terms before this gets ugly. I didn't call. I didn't even reply. Instead, I called my lawyer, a quiet, sharp man named Harris who had handled a property issue for me years back. I explained everything: the abandonment, the house, the joint accounts, the threats. Harris chuckled dryly. Tom, they don't have a leg to stand on. You're not obligated to fund adult children's lives, and there was no court order or separation agreement binding you. If anything, they might owe you for unauthorized use of joint funds. That little nugget of information made my coffee taste especially sweet the next morning. But Carla wasn't finished. About a week later, I got served, right there at my office, in front of my coworkers. A thick packet of paperwork alleging emotional abandonment, financial withholding, and, laughably, intentional infliction of distress. They were suing me. They were actually suing me. I went home that night, sat at my kitchen table, and read through every page. Most of it was padded with dramatic language, how Carla had sacrificed her youth for me. Never mind that she hadn't worked a job since Jake was born, by choice, how Lindsay and Jake struggled with self-esteem issues because of my constant absence. Ignoring the fact that I had made every single parent-teacher conference, every football game, every ballet recital. It was a smear campaign wrapped in legal jargon, and it hit me harder than I expected. Because somewhere, deep down, I think a part of me had still hoped, still wanted them to realize how badly they had treated me, to feel ashamed, to come crawling back with honest apologies, not demands for money. Instead, they had doubled down. They didn't see me as a person at all, just a bank account that had dared to close itself. I called Harris the next morning. Fight it, I said simply. Whatever it takes. And fight we did. The court dates were set. I could feel them gloating from across town, thinking they had backed me into a corner, thinking I would settle just to avoid the hassle. They underestimated just how deeply they had cut me. During this time, their lies began to unravel in ways I hadn't even touched. Without the house, they bounced from extended family members to cheap Airbnbs, each stay getting shorter as they wore out their welcome. Without my steady paychecks covering Lindsay's tuition, she had to drop out of her expensive private college. Without my help with Jake's car payment, the repo company came knocking one rainy afternoon, a fact I learned when Lindsay's friend, still on my friends list by accident, posted a photo of Jake yelling at the tow truck driver. Their world wasn't crumbling because of me. It was crumbling because it had been built on me, and they never thought to build anything of their own. But the true breaking point, the moment I knew there was no going back, came the night before our first hearing. I was sitting on my couch, half watching a baseball game, when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. No words, just a photo. It was Carla, sitting at some dingy-looking motel, makeup smudged, eyes red. Lindsay and Jake in the background, both looking furious and miserable. Under the photo, hope you're happy. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just guilt-tripping. Manipulation. I stared at the image for a long time, feeling absolutely nothing. No satisfaction. No triumph. Just a hollow, echoing finality. They wanted me to feel guilty. Instead, I felt free. The next morning, I walked into that courthouse with my head high and my heart steeled. What happened in that courtroom changed everything, not just for them, but for me too. Because when the judge read their demands, reviewed the evidence, and turned to me with a raised eyebrow, I realized it wasn't just me on trial. It was them. And for the first time, they would have to answer for everything they had taken for granted. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No grand mahogany panels, no echoing footsteps like you see in the movies, just beige walls, uncomfortable wooden benches, and a judge who looked like he'd seen 1,000 family squabbles just like mine. Carla sat across the aisle with Lindsay and Jake flanking her like some miserable honor guard. Lindsay kept fiddling with her phone, pretending she wasn't panicking. Jake just sat there slouched, arms crossed, glaring daggers at me like a child grounded for something he still didn't think was his fault. Carla was dressed in a conservative navy blue suit, trying to look respectable and wounded at the same time. She wouldn't even meet my eyes. When the judge called the case, the room fell into that nervous, humming silence. Carla's lawyer, some slick guy named Morton who clearly thought he was Perry Mason, jumped up first, practically throwing his papers onto the table. "Your Honor," he began, his voice full of the smug confidence of someone used to bullying his way through weak cases, "we are here today because Mr. Thompson has abandoned his obligations to his family. After decades of marriage and financial dependency, my client, and by extension, their children, have been left destitute through no fault of their own." He went on, painting this picture of me as some cruel, selfish tyrant who had suddenly snapped and decided to ruin their lives. Every sentence was another twist of the knife, another distortion of the years I had spent keeping that family afloat. When he finally sat down, the judge looked at me. "Mr. Thompson, your response?" Harris stood calmly. No theatrics, no raised voice. Just cold, hard facts. "Your Honor," Harris began, "my client did not abandon his family. He was effectively abandoned by his family, emotionally, socially, and practically. The plaintiffs voluntarily left Mr. Thompson alone on his birthday, publicly mocked him online, and removed themselves to a luxury cabin paid for with joint funds. Further, the plaintiffs are all adults, not dependents. There was no separation agreement obligating ongoing support. There was no divorce proceeding in place when Mr. Thompson legally closed joint accounts that he funded almost entirely on his own. There was no misconduct, only a long overdue realization that he deserved better. He laid out printouts of the Facebook posts, screenshots of their cruel captions and mocking comments. He displayed the joint account records, showing that 90% of the deposits came from my salary. He even produced the lease agreement, highlighting my sole responsibility for payments. When he was done, the judge sat back and steepled his fingers, peering at Carla like she was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "Mrs. Thompson," he said slowly, "do you have employment?" Carla squirmed. I manage the household." "That's not the question," the judge interrupted sharply. "Are you currently employed?" "No," she muttered. The judge turned to Lindsay and Jake. "Are either of you full-time students dependent on Mr. Thompson for support?" Jake bristled. "I was. Until he cut us off. You're 23 years old, Mr. Thompson, the judge said flatly. And according to these records, your college tuition was being paid out of pocket by your father, voluntarily, without a court order. Jake opened his mouth, then shut it again when his own lawyer yanked his sleeve. The judge leaned back and let out a long breath. I see no legal basis for these claims. No abandonment. No court-ordered financial obligation. No evidence of wrongdoing on Mr. Thompson's part. He turned to Carla, voice colder now. Frankly, this case reeks of entitlement. You cannot expect someone to continue supporting you indefinitely when you treat them with contempt. Actions have consequences. Carla's face crumbled. Lindsay looked like she was about to cry. Jake looked like he wanted to punch something. The judge wasn't done. As for the unauthorized use of joint funds for a personal vacation, he continued, tapping the papers, Mr. Thompson would be within his rights to pursue restitution. That means, Mrs. Thompson, you and your children could end up owing him money. The color drained from Carla's face so fast I thought she might pass out. In light of all this, the judge said briskly, the court rules in favor of the defendant. Case dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Thompson, you are free to go. I didn't move at first. I just sat there, stunned. Not because I doubted the outcome, Harris had been confident, but because something inside me that had been knotted up for years finally loosened. As I stood, I caught Carla's eyes. For a brief second, there was something there, regret, maybe, or just the hollow realization that the game she thought she was winning had ended in total defeat. I walked out without a word. Outside the courthouse, the sun was shining. It was a beautiful day, crisp and clean, the kind of day that begs you to start over. I stood there for a moment, just breathing it in. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't carrying anyone else's weight. I wasn't waiting for permission to be happy. I wasn't afraid of the next explosion, the next guilt trip, the next subtle betrayal disguised as family. I was free. The fallout was brutal for them. Without the house, they scattered. Carla ended up renting a cramped 2-bedroom apartment an hour away. Lindsay enrolled in community college after losing her scholarships. Jake bounced between part-time jobs, each one shorter-lived than the last. Occasionally, I'd get a stray email or two. Happy birthday, Dad, or thinking of you. Little fishing lines cast out, hoping I'd bite. I never did. I didn't hate them. I didn't need to. They had built their own prison out of selfishness and short-sightedness. My revenge wasn't screaming at them, or gloating, or punishing them further. My revenge was simple. I moved on. I reconnected with old friends. I traveled. I picked up woodworking, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. I even started dating again carefully, slowly, with a woman who smiled when I spoke and listened like my words actually mattered. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think about everything that had happened. About all the birthdays, anniversaries, holidays spent feeling invisible in my own home. About the years I spent pouring into a family that saw me as nothing more than an obligation. And I would smile, not because it hadn't hurt, but because I had survived it. Because I had finally chosen myself. And for once in my life, that was more than enough.